The rain in Lahore did not just fall, it claimed the city. It washed over the ancient red bricks of the old alleyways and drummed a relentless rhythm against the tall, tinted glass windows of the grand mansion belonging to Sikandar Bey. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly quiet. The wealth of the house was visible in every corner, from the heavy Persian rugs to the glittering crystal chandeliers, but to Alize, it felt like a beautifully decorated cage. Alize stood by her bedroom window, her fingers tracing the cold glass. Her heart, however, was miles away, in a small, poorly lit engineering workshop on the other side of the city. It was there that Zain worked. Zain did not have a famous family name. He did not have ancestral lands or a political lineage. What he did have were eyes that saw right through Alize's forced smiles, hands that worked tirelessly to build a future from scratch, and a heart that loved her with a fierce, quiet devotion. They had met by pure accident a year ago when Alize's car had broken down in a bustling market area. While her driver had panicked, Zain, who was passing by, had stepped in to help. When their eyes met as he handed her the keys, something fundamental shifted in Alize's world. "You were thinking about him again," a voice whispered from the doorway. Alize startled, turning around to see her younger cousin and closest confidant, Hania, closing the door softly behind her. "Is it that obvious?" Alize asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Only to me," Hania sighed, walking over and placing a comforting hand on Alize's shoulder. "But Alize, you need to be careful. Uncle Sikandar is already talking to the elders about your marriage alliance with the minister's son. If anyone in this house finds out about Zain, the consequences won't just be bad, they will be catastrophic." Alize turned back to the window, a tear slipping down her cheek. "They look at titles, wealth, and status, Hania. No one cares about the soul of the person. Zain treats me like I am the most precious thing in the universe. How can I give up on the only real happiness I have ever known?" That very evening, under the cover of the heavy rain, Alize did something incredibly risky. She slipped past the servants and used the back exit of the estate to meet Zain at their designated spot, an old, abandoned library cafe at the edge of the university district. When she arrived, drenched despite her umbrella, Zain was already there. He was sitting at a corner table, reviewing blueprints under a dim lamp. The moment he saw her, the exhaustion vanished from his face. He rushed over, taking her trembling, cold hands into his warm ones. "Alize, you shouldn't have come in this weather," Zain said, his voice laced with deep concern. "If your family finds out." "Let them," Alize interrupted, her voice breaking as she looked into his eyes. "Zain, my father is finalizing things. They are trying to sell me into a marriage for political gain. I am scared, Zain. For the first time in my life, I am truly terrified." Zain felt a cold dread settle in his chest, but he refused to let her see his fear. He gently wiped her tears with his thumb. "Listen to me, Alize. I may not have their billions, but I am building a life. My firm just got its first major contract approval today. I am fighting for you, every single second of the day. Don't lose hope, we will face them." For a few brief hours, wrapped in Zain's reassurances, Alize felt safe. But the universe was already weaving a web of tragedy around them. As they walked out of the cafe, a black sedan with darkened windows rolled slowly past. Inside the car was Alize's elder brother, Hamza. The silence inside the grand dining room that night was heavier than usual. The long mahogany table was laden with expensive dishes, but no one was eating. At the head of the table sat Sikandar Bey, his face carved from stone. Alize sat near the end, her eyes fixed on her plate, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel the tense energy vibrating through her brother Hamza, who sat directly across from her, staring at her with a look of pure disgust. Suddenly, Sikandar Bey dropped his silver fork. The sharp clang echoed through the cavernous room like a gunshot. The servants instantly froze and retreated into the shadows. "Hamza tells me you were seen in the university district tonight, Alize," Sikandar said, his voice deceptively calm, yet dripping with authority. Alize's breath caught in her throat. She looked up, her face draining of color. I went to meet a friend, Baba." "A friend?" Hamza sneered, slamming his hand on the table. "Don't lie to Baba. I saw you with that street rat. The mechanic's boy. You were holding his hand. Have you lost your mind, Alize? Do you have any idea what this would do to our family's reputation if the media or our associates found out?" Alize's mother, a fragile woman bound by societal expectations, gasped and covered her mouth. "Alize, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't disgrace us like this." The word disgrace stung Alize's soul. The fear that had kept her silent for months suddenly transformed into a spark of defiance. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. He is not a street rat. Alize shouted, her voice trembling but resolute. His name is Zain. He is an educated, honorable man who respects me far more than anyone in this room does. I love him, Baba. And I will not let you insult him. An absolute, terrifying silence fell over the room. No one had ever dared to raise their voice against Sikandar Bey. Sikandar rose slowly from his chair. His gaze was terrifyingly cold. He walked over to Alize, his footsteps sounding like a death march. When he stood before her, the sheer weight of his authority made her want to shrink, but she kept her chin up. Love, Sikandar whispered, the word sounding like poison on his tongue. You think you know what the world is about. You are a child living in a fantasy. This family's name was built on blood, honor, and strict alliances. I will not allow a foolish girl to destroy it for a nobody. He is not a nobody. Alize cried out, tears streaming down her face. Before she could say another word, Sikandar turned to Hamza. Take her phone. Lock her in her room. Post guards at the balcony and the back doors. She will not step a single foot outside this house until the day of her wedding with the minister's son. Baba, please, you can't do this, Alize screamed as Hamza roughly grabbed her arm, snatching her purse away to find her phone. I am doing what is necessary to save you from your own stupidity, Sikandar said coldly, turning his back on her. Alize was dragged up the grand staircase, her cries echoing through the massive halls of the mansion. Her mother wept silently into her hands, unable and unwilling to challenge the patriarch of the family. When the heavy oak door of her bedroom slammed shut and the distinct sound of the key turning in the lock echoed through the room, Alize collapsed against the door. She was completely cut off from the world. She had no way to warn Zain, no way to tell him that the storm had finally broken over their heads. Meanwhile, across the city, Zain stood outside his small workshop, watching the rain stop and the night sky clear. He looked at his phone, waiting for her usual, I reached home safely, text. The text never came. Hours passed, and a deep, agonizing intuition told him that his worst nightmare had just become reality.
The days turned into a blur of absolute isolation for Alize. The heavy oak door of her bedroom became a boundary between her life and the rest of the world. Every morning, a silent maid would bring a tray of food, placing it on the table without making eye contact, terrified of Sikandar Bey's strict orders. No one speaks to her. No one gives her hope. Alize didn't touch the food. Her hunger strike wasn't a calculated tactic, her throat was simply too tight with grief to swallow anything. Her eyes were constantly red from crying, and she spent her hours pacing the room or sitting by the locked balcony doors, staring at the distant city lights. On the fourth evening of her captivity, the lock clicked. The door swung open, and Sikandar Bey walked in, followed by Hamza. Her brother carried a thick folder in his hand, the legal documents for her upcoming alliance with the minister's son, Daniel. Look at yourself, Sikandar said, looking down at his pale, exhausted daughter with a mix of disappointment and irritation. You are ruining your health for a boy who probably doesn't even remember your face by now. Zain isn't like that, Alize whispered, her voice hoarse but completely steady. He loves me, Baba. You can lock me in this room for the rest of my life, but my heart belongs to him. Hamza stepped forward, tossing the thick folder onto her bed with a loud thud. Your heart doesn't sign contracts, Alize. Daniel's family has already agreed to the terms. The media will announce the engagement next week. You will smile for the cameras, you will wear the diamond ring they buy you, and you will put an end to this childish drama. Alize looked at the papers, then looked directly into her brother's eyes. I will never sign it. I will tell the journalists at the press conference exactly what you are doing to me. I will tell everyone that you are forcing me into this. Hamza's face turned bright red with rage. He took a threatening step toward her, but Sikandar held up a hand, stopping his son. You think you have a choice, Alize? Sikandar's voice was dangerously low, cold enough to freeze the room. Let me tell you what happened today while you were sitting in this comfortable room, refusing your meals. Alize felt a sudden, sharp prick of fear in her chest. Her breath hitched. What did you do? Sikandar smiled, a cruel, calculating expression. I sent my men to that little engineering workshop. It turns out, your honorable boy relies heavily on bank loans and government permits to keep his small firm running. With one phone call, I had his bank accounts frozen for inspection. With another call, his major contract approval, the one he was so proud of, was suspended under the suspicion of fraud. No, Alize gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. No, Baba, please. He worked so hard for that. He has nothing to do with this. He has everything to do with this because he dared to look at my daughter, Sikandar hissed. If you refuse to sign these papers, or if you make even a single scene, I will ensure that Zain is arrested on fabricated charges. I will ruin his career, his family's survival, and his entire future. He will spend his youth rotting in a dark jail cell. Alize felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. She collapsed onto her bed, clutching her stomach as dry, agonizing sobs tore through her body. This was the ultimate trap. Her defiance wouldn't just hurt her, it would utterly destroy the man she loved. You have until tomorrow morning to think about it, Sikander said coldly. He turned and walked out of the room. Hamza gave her one last mocking look before following him, and the heavy door was locked once more. Alone in the dark, Alize buried her face in her pillow, her screams muffled by the heavy fabric. She was trapped in a nightmare where her love had become a weapon used against the person she loved most. On the other side of Lahore, the rain had returned, washing over the metal roof of Zain's workshop. Inside, the lights were off. Zain sat on a wooden crate, his head buried in his hands. The day had been a complete disaster. First, his bank manager had called to inform him that his commercial account was under a sudden administrative freeze. Then, the municipal council had sent a legal notice halting his construction project due to an alleged zoning violation. When Zain had gone to the offices to demand answers, an older official had pulled him aside, speaking in a nervous whisper. "Son, you've crossed paths with Sikander Bey. Withdraw before he completely destroys you. Men like him don't leave survivors." Zain knew exactly what this meant. Alize's family had found out. His friends and his few employees had advised him to leave the city, to hide until the storm passed. But Zain looked at the small silver ring he kept in his pocket, a cheap ring he had bought with his first savings, hoping to place it on Alize's finger one day. He couldn't leave her. He knew the hell she must be going through inside that mansion. "Zain, please think practically," his closest friend, Bilal, urged, standing near the doorway. "They have money, power, and police backing. You are a self-made engineer. How can a single ant fight a mountain?" Zain stood up, his eyes reflecting a quiet, unbreakable resolve. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a fierce determination. "I am not fighting a mountain, Bilal. I am saving the girl who gave up her peace for me. If Sikander Bey thinks his wealth makes him a god, then I will show him that a man who has nothing to lose is far more dangerous." Zain spent the rest of the night working under a single flashlight. He didn't focus on his ruined contracts. Instead, he began compiling his own data. For the past year, through his engineering work, he had casually studied the urban development maps of Lahore, including the illegal land acquisitions made by various political elites, including Sikander Bey's family associates. It was a dangerous game, but it was the only card he had left to play. The next morning, Zain dressed in his finest suit. He didn't look like a defeated mechanic, he looked like a man ready for war. He walked straight to the corporate headquarters of Sikander Bey's empire. The security guards at the grand glass entrance tried to block him, but Zain's commanding tone stopped them. "Tell Sikander Bey that Zain is here. Tell him I have the complete structural audit files for the Gulberg Commercial Plaza project." The name of the project worked like magic. Within 5 minutes, Zain was escorted up the private elevator to the top floor, entering a massive boardroom where Sikander Bey sat alone at a giant glass table, sipping tea. Sikander didn't look up as Zain entered. "You have courage, boy. I'll give you that. Most people in your position would be on a bus out of the province by now." "I don't run away from my life, Bey Sahab," Zain said, walking right up to the table and placing a thin black pendrive directly in front of the billionaire. Sikander finally raised his eyes, a look of cold amusement on his face. "What is this? A pathetic attempt to blackmail me? Do you think a few leaked papers can touch a man of my stature?" "I know I can't ruin your empire," Zain said calmly, leaning forward. "But this pendrive doesn't contain gossip. It contains the official geological and structural flaws of your premium commercial plaza, the one your partner, the minister, financed. If this data reaches the International Safety Board and the High Court, the project will be condemned, the minister's political career will end, and your family will face billions in lawsuits." Sikander's hand tightened around his teacup. The amusement vanished from his eyes, replaced by a dangerous glare. "You are playing with fire, boy. I am already burning, sir," Zain replied, his voice completely devoid of fear. "I don't want your money, and I don't want to ruin your business. I only want one thing. Release Alize from that prison. Stop forcing her into a life she doesn't want. Let her choose her own path." Sikander stared at Zain for a long, agonizing minute. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. Finally, Sikander picked up the pendrive, tossing it into his pocket. You think you've won, Sikander whispered. You have merely delayed the inevitable. I will handle this little problem of yours. And as for Alizé, she will never be yours. I would rather see her dead than married to a blackmailer. Zayn stood his ground. Then we will see who survives the storm, Bey Sahab. With those words, Zayn turned and walked out, his heart pounding. He had bought Alizé some time, but he knew the real battle had only just begun. Back at the mansion, the psychological warfare continued. Alizé had refused to sign the contract, using the threat of Zayn's destruction as her shield of silence. However, the atmosphere inside the house was beginning to shift. Alizé's mother, Zainab, could no longer bear the sight of her daughter's deteriorating condition. She secretly slipped into Alizé's room late at night while the guards were changing shifts. Seeing her daughter huddled in the corner of the bed, pale and lifeless, Zainab's maternal instinct finally overcame her fear of her husband. She rushed over, pulling Alizé into her arms. My child, my beautiful Alizé, please eat something, Zainab wept, brushing the tangled hair from her daughter's face. You are killing yourself. Let me die, Ami, Alizé sobbed, burying her face in her mother's lap. Baba has destroyed Zayn's life. He is forcing me to marry a man I despise. What is left for me to live for? Zainab looked at her daughter's absolute despair, and a deep sense of guilt washed over her. She remembered her own youth, how she had been forced into a marriage with Sikander for status, spending decades living in a cold house devoid of real affection. She didn't want this golden cage to destroy her daughter the way it had slowly eroded her own spirit. Listen to me, Alizé, Zainab whispered urgently, looking toward the locked door. Your father is furious because that boy, Zayn, he came to the office today. He didn't beg, he stood up to your father. He threatened their biggest business alliance to protect you. Alizé's eyes went wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Zayn did that. Oh no, Baba will kill him. No, your father is actually worried, Zainab explained. For the first time, Sikander is realizing that money cannot buy everything. Zayn's love for you has made him fearless. But Hamza is planning something dangerous. He is hiring local thugs to attack Zayn's workshop tomorrow night and destroy his files permanently. Alizé's heart stopped. She grabbed her mother's hands tightly. Ami, you have to help me. If anything happens to Zayn, I will end my life right here in this room. I swear it on your name. Zainab looked at her daughter's resolute face and realized that this wasn't a temporary infatuation, this was a love that would either end in beautiful fulfillment or absolute tragedy. I will help you, Zainab whispered, her voice trembling but determined. Tomorrow night, when Hamza leaves with his men, I will take the master key from your father's study. I will let you out. But you must promise me, Alizé, wherever you go, whatever you do, you must survive. Back at the mansion, the psychological warfare continued. Alizé had refused to sign the contract, using the threat of Zayn's destruction as her shield of silence. However, the atmosphere inside the house was beginning to shift. Alizé's mother, Zainab, could no longer bear the sight of her daughter's deteriorating condition. She secretly slipped into Alizé's room late at night while the guards were changing shifts. Seeing her daughter huddled in the corner of the bed, pale and lifeless, Zainab's maternal instinct finally overcame her fear of her husband. She rushed over, pulling Alizé into her arms. My child, my beautiful Alizé, please eat something, Zainab wept, brushing the tangled hair from her daughter's face. You are killing yourself. Let me die, Ami, Alizé sobbed, burying her face in her mother's lap. Baba has destroyed Zayn's life. He is forcing me to marry a man I despise. What is left for me to live for? Zainab looked at her daughter's absolute despair, and a deep sense of guilt washed over her. She remembered her own youth, how she had been forced into a marriage with Sikander for status, spending decades living in a cold house devoid of real affection. She didn't want this golden cage to destroy her daughter the way it had slowly eroded her own spirit. Listen to me, Alizé, Zainab whispered urgently, looking toward the locked door. Your father is furious because that boy, Zayn, he came to the office today. He didn't beg, he stood up to your father. He threatened their biggest business alliance to protect you. Alizé's eyes went wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Zayn did that. Oh no, Baba will kill him. No, your father is actually worried, Zainab explained. For the first time, Sikander is realizing that money cannot buy everything. Zayn's love for you has made him fearless. But Hamza is planning something dangerous. He is hiring local thugs to attack Zayn's workshop tomorrow night and destroy his files permanently. Alizé's heart stopped. She grabbed her mother's hands tightly. Ami, you have to help me. If anything happens to Zain, I will end my life right here in this room. I swear it on your name. Zainab looked at her daughter's resolute face and realized that this wasn't a temporary infatuation, this was a love that would either end in beautiful fulfillment or absolute tragedy. I will help you, Zainab whispered, her voice trembling but determined. Tomorrow night, when Hamza leaves with his men, I will take the master key from your father's study. I will let you out. But you must promise me, Alize, wherever you go, whatever you do, you must survive. The next night, the air was thick with the scent of upcoming rain. The grand mansion was quiet, save for the sound of Hamza's car roaring out of the driveway. He was heading to the industrial district with a group of hired men to eliminate the threat Zain posed once and for all. Inside the dark study, Zainab's hands shook as she opened Sikandar's heavy wooden desk. Her fingers found the brass master key. She slipped it into her shawl and hurried up the stairs, her heart racing against her ribs. With a soft click, Alize's bedroom door swung open. Alize stood there, wearing a simple black abaya, her eyes bright with a dangerous fire. Go, my daughter, Zainab said, tears streaming down her face as she handed Alize a small pouch containing her own personal jewelry and some cash. Run to him, protect each other. Alize hugged her mother tightly, a silent thank you passing between them, before she slipped down the back stairs and vanished into the dark, rainy night. She didn't look for a taxi, she just ran through the alleyways, her feet slipping on the wet asphalt, her mind filled with only one thought: I have to reach Zain before Hamza does. Meanwhile, at the workshop, Zain was packing his remaining design files into a backpack. The air outside suddenly grew tense as two large black vehicles pulled up, blocking the entrance. Hamza stepped out, accompanied by 4 men armed with iron rods. Did you really think a piece of plastic could save you, mechanic? Hamza sneered, walking into the workshop as his men began smashing the glass counters and overturning the wooden tables. Zain didn't back down. He grabbed a heavy metal wrench from his workbench, stepping forward. I told your father, I am not afraid of your family. You can break my shop, Hamza, but you cannot change the truth. The truth is that you are going to leave this city in an ambulance. Hamza shouted, signaling his men to attack. A brutal fight broke out. Zain fought like a man possessed, fueled by months of anger and his deep love for Alize. He managed to knock down 2 of the thugs, but the numbers were against him. A heavy iron rod struck his shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor. Hamza kicked him viciously in the ribs, laughing as Zain gasped for air, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Stop it! Stop it right now! A piercing scream echoed through the shattered doorway. Hamza froze, turning around in absolute shock to see Alize standing there, drenched in rain, her eyes blazing with an intensity he had never seen before. She rushed into the workshop, throwing herself over Zain's bruised body, shielding him from any further blows. Alize, why are you here? Get up, Hamza ordered, reaching out to grab her hair. Touch me and I will kill myself right now with these broken shards of glass. Alize screamed, picking up a sharp piece of glass from the shattered table and holding it against her own wrist. Her hand was steady, her expression completely devoid of fear. I mean it, Hamza. If you hit him one more time, my blood will be on your hands, and Baba will have to explain to the entire world why his daughter died in a mechanic's shop. Hamza stepped back, terrified by the sheer madness and purity of her defiance. He realized that Alize was completely beyond their control now. She wasn't their submissive sister anymore, she was a woman ready to die for her love. The silence inside the wrecked workshop was deafening, broken only by the sound of the pouring rain outside and Zain's heavy, labored breathing. Alize stood like a protective wall over him, her hand holding the sharp glass shard tightly against her own wrist. Her eyes were fixed on her brother Hamza, refusing to blink. Hamza looked at his sister, then at Zain, who was trying to push himself up despite his fractured ribs. Hamza's phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with a shaking hand. It was an urgent call from their father, Sikandar Bey. Hamza. Sikandar's voice boomed through the speaker, loud enough for Alize to hear. Where is Alize? Your mother is weeping, and the master key is missing from my desk. Did she escape? Hamza looked at Alize, his voice turning tense. She is here, Baba. At the workshop. She is shielding him. She is threatening to end her life if we touch him. There was a long, terrifying pause on the other end of the line. For the first time in his life, Sikandar Bey felt a chill of genuine panic. He didn't care about Zain, but Alize was his only daughter. If she died in an industrial slum, the scandal would destroy his name forever, and the guilt would haunt his household. Do not touch either of them, Sikander commanded, his tone dropping its usual arrogance, replaced by an anxious coldness. Bring them to the mansion. Both of them. If that boy refuses to come, tell him I am waiting to settle this face to face. No more thugs. Just us. Hamza ended the call, looking defeated. He pointed an angry finger at Zain. Get up. Baba wants you at the house. If you have even an ounce of the courage you showed in his boardroom, you will face him now. Zain gripped Alize's hand, using her support to stand up. His jacket was torn, his shoulder was bleeding, and every breath felt like fire in his lungs, but his eyes were bright with an unbreakable spirit. I have been waiting for this invitation my whole life, Hamza, Zain said, wiping the blood from his lip. He turned to Alize, gently taking the piece of glass from her hand and throwing it away. Don't look back, Alize. Tonight, we either win together, or we walk into the dark together. Alize wrapped her arm around his waist to support him, and together, they walked out into the rain, stepping into the back of Hamza's black sedan. The final battleground was set where it had all begun, the grand mansion of Sikander Bey. When they entered the grand living room of the mansion, the scene was set like a courtroom. Sikander Bey stood by the massive fireplace, his back to them. Zainab sat on the sofa, her face buried in a wet handkerchief, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. As the door closed, Sikander turned around. His eyes swept over Zain's bruised face, his torn clothes, and then settled on Alize, whose hand was tightly locked with Zain's. Look at you, Sikander said, his voice echoing in the vast room. A daughter of the proudest family in this province, standing covered in mud and blood, holding the hand of a commoner. Is this the upbringing I gave you, Alize? You gave me everything money could buy, Baba, Alize said, her voice echoing with a profound, calm maturity that shocked her father. But you never taught me how to live without a soul. Zain gave me a soul. He showed me respect when you treated me like a political transaction. If being your daughter means I have to live a lie, then I renounce this wealth tonight. Sikander walked forward, stopping just 2 feet away from Zain. The billionaire's presence was massive, but Zain did not lower his gaze. You, Sikander hissed, looking into Zain's eyes. You think you are a hero? You brought my daughter to the streets. You threatened my businesses. I can still have you erased from this city before the sun rises. You can erase my body, Bey Sahab, Zain replied, his voice calm, steady, and full of dignity. But you cannot erase the truth. Look at your daughter. She didn't leave this house for my money, I have none. She didn't leave for my status. She left because she knows that if she stays here, she will become a ghost like everyone else in this room who sacrificed their happiness for your pride. Sikander raised his hand, his anger reaching a boiling point, ready to strike Zain. Stop it, Sikander. The shout didn't come from Alize. It came from the sofa. Zainab stood up, her face wet with tears but her posture completely rigid. She walked over, standing between her husband and the young couple. For 30 years, I have stayed silent, Zainab said, her voice trembling with decades of suppressed emotion. I let you decide who I talk to, where I go, and how I breathe. I watched you turn our son Hamza into a cold, heartless mirror of yourself. But I will not let you destroy Alize. Look at them, Sikander. That boy took iron rods to his body to protect her. Our own son went there to break his bones. Who is the honorable one here? The boy who bleeds for love, or the family that hires criminals to protect their reputation? Sikander stared at his wife, completely stunned. In 3 decades of marriage, Zainab had never looked him in the eye with such defiance. He looked at Hamza, who was looking down at the floor, unable to meet his father's gaze. He looked at Alize, whose eyes were filled with absolute hatred for the environment she grew up in. Finally, Sikander looked closely at Zain. He saw the deep bruises on the young man's face, the blood soaking through his shirt, and yet, Zain's grip on Alize's hand had not loosened even by a millimeter. He was willing to die right there on the marble floor just to keep her safe. For the first time in his life, the heavy walls of Sikander Bey's pride began to crack. He realized that if he forced this marriage with the minister's son, Alize would either kill herself or run away forever. He would lose his daughter permanently, and the hollow empire he built would have no one left to inherit its silence. Sikander turned around, walking back toward the fireplace. The room stayed completely silent for 3 long minutes. The only sound was the crackle of the wood and the rain against the glass. The minister's alliance is cancelled, Sikander said, his voice suddenly sounding old, tired, and devoid of its usual malice. Alize gasped, her grip tightening on Zain's arm. Sikander didn't turn around, but he spoke clearly. Hamza, call our legal team. Tell them to drop all structural audit disputes with the municipal council. Release the freeze on Zain's firm's accounts immediately. Hamza looked shocked. But Baba, do it, Sikander commanded quietly. He then turned his head slightly, looking toward Zain from the corner of his eye. Young man, you have a business to rebuild. If your firm does not show profit by the end of this quarter, I will personally ensure you never see my daughter again. But if you prove your worth through your hard work, this house will not close its doors to you. Alizé let out a sob of pure, unadulterated joy. She looked at Zain, whose tired face broke into a beautiful, victorious smile. Zainab rushed forward, wrapping her arms around both Alizé and Zain, weeping tears of relief. Even Hamza, seeing the absolute transformation of the atmosphere, slipped his hands into his pockets and walked away, a silent acceptance settling into his heart. 6 months later, the sun rose over Lahore, painting the sky in beautiful shades of gold and pink. The courtyard of the grand mansion was decorated not with political banners or stiff corporate arrangements, but with thousands of white jasmine flowers and soft, warm fairy lights. Zain stood near the stage, looking incredibly handsome in a traditional black sherwani. His workshop had been completely rebuilt, his engineering firm had successfully delivered its first major urban project, and his name was now respected throughout the industry, not because of a family title, but because of his sheer dedication and brilliance. The heavy wooden doors of the mansion opened. Alizé stepped out, wearing a breathtaking deep red bridal lehenga, her face glowing with absolute happiness. She wasn't walking like a prisoner anymore, she was walking toward her freedom, toward the life she had fought so fiercely to claim. Sikander Bey walked beside her, his hand supporting her elbow. As they reached the stage, Sikander stopped, looking at Zain. The billionaire didn't offer a cold handshake. Instead, he took Alizé's hand and gently placed it into Zain's palm. Take care of her, Sikander said, a genuine smile finally appearing on his stone face. You prove to me that the strongest foundation in the world isn't built on money, it's built on a heart that doesn't know how to give up. I will protect her with my life, sir, Zain replied, bowing his head with deep respect. As the music filled the air and the guests cheered, Alizé looked into Zain's eyes, her heart overflowing with peace. The storm had finally passed, the walls of the cage had crumbled, and their love had won the ultimate victory.